I'd like to say good morning to everyone, and this is the last day of the Congress, and so I'd like to start with a small story to wake you all up. Temel and Dursun, two guys from the Black Sea, were holding a competition asking questions. And whatever Temel asked, Dursun answered. Whatever Dursun asked, Temel could not answer. And finally, he said he should do something to win the competition. So, he asks a quiz. Lives in a cage, makes a jig-jig sound. What is it? Dursun said, canary. No, you couldn't. It's fish. Well, what about fish? You said it's not yellow. You dye it, it becomes yellow. It doesn't live in a cage. Well, you put it in a cage, and then he said, well, it doesn't make that sound. And Temel said, well, that's the part I fooled you with. So it's a schizophrenia. You can't explain schizophrenia with just an area, a transmitter or something. That's the fooling part, the trick of the matter. But we're going to talk about the frontal lobe, but we can't expect everything to be explained by the frontal lobe. That's fooling ourselves. The gauge, the Phileas gauge incident, I'd like to start with that. This is something all of you know it. Gage is a worker working in the railroad construction, and he's working with explosives. And an accident happens, and an iron rod passes through Gage's head. The frontal lobe is lost. But in a few minutes, he got up, started talking to people, was fully conscious, went to the hospital, had his treatment, and after a while went back to his work. Prior to the accident, he was someone that was well known, engaged with the environment and so forth, was a good guy. But after the accident, he became illogical, all value assessment was lost, who couldn't keep his word, and he started demanding unbelievable things from his environment, and especially if they want ladies, so don't be with him too long, he will harass you. And so he could not keep his work, and he was fired from his work. But to him, that wasn't important. I mean, getting fired, and perhaps all this is to lack all care and to go around in this mood. Perhaps if we could press a button and do this, it would be wonderful. He lived in this manner, and it was declared that with an epileptic seizure in the end, he died. What happened to Gage now? Let's try to see that. The frontal lobes were damaged, and we know the frontal lobes, I'm going to talk about the prefrontal cortex especially, and also and this is the part where emotions, moods, control, organization, attention, motivation, memory, some of these processes also are in the periosicrate region. And when information is received, processing that information and with thinking and behavior, the prefrontal cortex is important. And what happened to Gage is that the prefrontal cortex was damaged and parts of it did not exist, so he could not fulfill some of these things. If we could think like this, that people go to school and so forth and everything, we learn, grow up, we invest in the prefrontal cortex. That's where we develop and grow. But in schizophrenia, and this region, this area, what happens? It shrinks, it becomes smaller, quantity and quality-wise. There is a reduction. This area, unfortunately, in schizophrenia, which is so valuable in normal life, sort of goes back to the point where it all started from. What happens? When we consider this, the structural changes appear to begin with. What sort of structural changes? The studies in schizophrenia that showed that gray matter is reduced. This is the area where the neuronal beds are lying and its nutrition is provided. And concerning gray matter as well, there are other findings, but as white matter, that is the area where the long axis exists. But the basic problem is the gray matter. Functionally, when we have an outlook from the functional perspective, are the cells the only thing that are lost? But no, that's not it all at all. For example, blood flow, metabolism in that area is reduced. Efficacy of this area is reduced. And with the SPECT and MRI studies, it was shown that the hypofrontality, even in people that do not use drugs, terminate drugs, or during childhood, this is present. This is independent of time. And this was shown. And to the extent of frontality, to that extent there is negativity. And that schizophrenic cases are more evident in the deficit syndrome. When these patients are compared with healthy subjects, during rest, for example, there was no difference seen. But functional memory, when functional memory was on call, then the metabolism and blood circulation increases in the normal people, but that doesn't happen in the schizophrenic patients. And the necessary activity cannot be provided. Here again the cell numbers are reduced, sizes have shrunk. What else happens in the patients? If we consider this from the neurodevelopmental perspective, this is the area that develops latest, although we take care about it, and it completes its development in late adolescence. For example, actually there is a pruning of the synapses, and proper synapses are tied up, but accompanying that, myelization continues as well. And proper synapse and paths appear, and in these channels or paths, myelization and improves the quality of neuronal transmission. And so that with proper neuronal transmission, activity is more properly processed. Everything is more strong and healthy as a result of this activity taking place. In the patient, that is in the schizophrenic, these attachments are disturbed. Actually, in the studies that have been carried out in the white area, white matter, it has been shown that there are dysfunctions. Well, on hand, the cells are reduced, and on the other hand, the synapses are distorted. Well, what about the situation of the cells that remain? Well, that's not completely void as well. And as postmodern studies have shown, the size of these cells as well as the extensions are reduced. Abnormal synaptic appearances are observed. The structure of the synapses and its functions, also proteins are reduced. For example, RAB3A are reduced, as can be shown at the synaptic level. What else has been shown? And neurotrophic factors from the brain as well. And for the neurotrophins to be functional, the necessary receptors are also reduced. And that is TRC mRNA is reduced, and what is remaining cannot work because there's a problem at the receptor level as well. So there is no nutrition for the cells, synaptic problems arise, and the cells lose their function, and naturally they are distorted. What has the studies on this field shown? The MRS work, for example, that shows the integrity of the cells, and acetyl aspartate, that is the after glutamate is the free amino acid, that's the second biggest in amount. And inside the neuron, in the mitochondria, it is synthesized and is in the neuronal glia circulation. And also it has shown that in these individuals and dorsolateral prefrontal cortex in the hand, the hippocampus as well, and acetyl aspartate levels show quite a significant reduction. And also in the MRS and PET studies that were undertaken at the same time, and both the levels of N-acetyl aspartate levels and also blood circulation of the brain simultaneously is disturbed in these cases. In one of our studies, and that's the only one that we carried out on this area, and here we observed that in the frontal area NAA levels showed a reduction, and also the choline values were reduced, and that is important parameter indicating metabolism. And this we reached conclusions that were supportive of this statement. There was another interesting experiment which I found interesting, and that is in monkeys, the newborn monkeys had the hippocampus extracted, and also in a similar way 8-year-old monkeys and acetyl aspartate levels of both were compared. It was observed that NAA in the new infant was reduced, and that is a finding that supports neural development, and incidences that come later on do not play an important role, but pathologies that we start off with are related to this reduction. And also pathologies in other areas can have its influence on this area. That was the hippocampus, but for schizophrenia, it could be that a pathology that appears in any other area can have an effect on other parts of the brain. Neurodevelopmental hypothesis, and just in reverse of this, there are other findings that support the reverse. In chronic patients, that is the NAA level is pretty low, and in the new onset of schizophrenia, just the opposite exists, and degenerative diseases show all that this is not observed. This is contradictory or an argument against this. Well, the cells are lost, are reduced, the synapses are reduced, and the remaining cells have numerous problems. Is that all? Of course not. That is all. The transmitter levels in this area also face certain problems. The most important is the dopamine, as you all know. And functionally, dopamine is a transmitter that plays a key role. Receptor stimulation is closely related to determination of the function. You know about the studies that have been carried out, and one point I'd like to point out, in dopamine animal assays, that it is regulated, it sort of has a fine regulation on the stimulation, so that a specific response is aroused. And dopamine plays an important role. If an individual subject faces stress, in a simple response like to stress, dopamine plays an important role. Any irregularity in dopamine naturally means that the stimulant is irregular, and the indications, cognitive and negative indications in schizophrenia, finds expression in this manner. Also, there are some evidence about this point, and that is the polymorphism of the COT enzyme. And the COT gene is coded by a single polymorphism, and which increases the effect of dopamine, so there is no fine-tuning possible in that case. Another important neurotransmitter is GABA. And during memory function is the basic transmitter for pyramidal neuron synchronization is provided. During this, it decides which neurons are to be activated. The second is that in functional memory, it also decides which one of these will be in force. It's like the orchestra leader. You says it's your turn, or you stop, or you start. GABA provides synchronization. In schizophrenia concerning GABA, there are studies that have been carried out. Some of the anti-tuberculosis drugs had been leading to symptoms similar to schizophrenia. What they were done, that glutamic acid and carboxylate were inhibited, and so psychotic symptoms were appearing as a result. Naturally, it's an experiment, but on patients, when the same thing was gathered, glutamic acid decarboxylase 67 and its mRNA in the tissue concentration was found to be less in amount. And in the post-mortem studies, in the same manner, concerning GABAergic neurons, that RNA protein was at a low level. Another material is glutamate. Glutamate lately has been very much in the forefront in the etiology of schizophrenia, especially RNA receptors, because of their function. These receptors, as you know, are important, and it's the basic necessary receptor for the new synapses to exist, and they need glutamate in order to fulfill this function. And if the glutamate and MNDA receptors are working, that we see a new information networks can appear. Otherwise, they cannot be taking place. And also, it can lead, if that does happen, it can lead to symptoms similar to schizophrenia. If there is a problem in an MDA or in glutamate, then schizophrenic-like and negative symptoms appear. The work has shown that in the prefrontal area, there can be problems on the NMDA receptors and MDA in the subunits. Phosphorylation is reduced, and NR1 in series 97 phosphorylation is reduced, and that disturbs the NMDA receptor function. And glutamate could not fulfill its function, and no response to neurotropic factors, and synapses cannot appear. Naturally, there is an interesting situation, which is that, as we have observed, prefrontal cortex, which is the most important area, and in the schizophrenia patient, everything happens there. Cell loss, useless cells, neurotransmitters, receptors have problems, and naturally, in such a chaotic situation and complex situation, one thing that we must understand is that you can't improve such a complex situation with a single antipsychotic medication or just by medication. And another thing is that it seems that we're very unlucky. All the problems are happening there. And we see that in the etiology, even in the 60% positive cases, and concluding paralysis for toxoplasma positivism, it's positive here. Everything negative seems to accumulate here. That's not it. It's that the defense mechanism is unsatisfactory, so at one point they are challenged by these and cannot stand up. Epigenetic and genetic incidences come together, and the stress model, genetic factors, biological factors, and psychosocial risk factors, when all of these get together, this problem arises, influences the frontal cortex, and schizophrenia appears. Thank you.